and welcome back to another YouTube video. So I recently stumbled on the Assassin's Apprentice graphic novel by Dark Horse. I was amazed to find there was zero discussion about this. Everyone knows about the Song of Ice and Fire graphic novels, and the Wheel of Time ones have a bit of notoriety in the right corners of the internet. And as an avid Realm of the Elderlings fan, I found myself drawn to this adaptation. A retelling of one of my favorite stories ever. So I just decided, let's jump into it. Let's see what it looks like. And if you want more Fitz chivalry content in the future, like and subscribe and I'll keep it coming. I think this book series had an uphill battle being adapted this way, for a couple different reasons. The first of which is the story isn't action-based. Don't get me wrong, the Realm of the Elderlings has some nuggets of raw, unadulterated action and bloodshed that rivals some of the best in the genre. But that's all within the weavings of Fitz's life. The books are more slice of life than they are action-adventure. And I think that makes them a bit harder as an adaptation, especially when you don't have Hobb's gorgeous prose to fall back on. The next massive hurdle in adapting Assassin's Apprentice is the loss of voice. Fitz's voice is integral to the story. His perception on everything around him as he comes of age, it not only brings characters to life, but the magic in the world. So, after reading the story, how do I feel? Well, I think he did a fine job. My worries were relevant to be sure, but it was handled better than my first expectations. There were pretty constant dialogue boxes reflecting Fitz's point of view on his life, but some of the more visceral details that Fitz recalls in the novels were lost, unfortunately. However, it also does add something to the story as well. It adds a very different perspective. So looking back on the beginning of Fitz's story here, I'm actually very surprised to see how similar he was as a child to Bee. It's an interesting parallel that was lost on me after 12 novels in between the two books. I think it's a lot more obvious here too, because we're not in Fitz's first person point of view, but instead looking at him from a more external position, much as how Fitz was looking at Bee when she was young. Things like his muteness don't strike as hard when I first read the book because we always had his internal dialogue and his thoughts on things. And when he did finally start speaking, people commented on how articulate he was, the same as they did with Bee. But again, it was hard to pick up on because I already knew him to be very articulate from his internal thoughts. Here it's much more apparent and adds a lot of intrigue to the story, which I really like. But the lack of internal dialogue really took its toll on some of the smaller things in the story for sure. The first one I noticed was Nosy. You see Fitz and the dog together in panels, and the overhead dialogue says that they're bonded, but it lacks that true connection that you get from the books. There's still a lot lost in the conversion of prose into a visual medium. However, the biggest pro from the graphic novels is that they are fast. You can get through these in about an hour. Granted, it only goes about a third of the way through the first book, Assassin's Apprentice, but it's at a breakneck speed. I think that has a lot of appeal, and it can attract a lot of new readers who don't necessarily enjoy the slow build that we experienced in the novels. However, it could also be a bit of a turnoff for current fans of the series. It's a give and take. So next, I want to talk a little bit about the art. I'm far from an art critic. You'd have to talk to my brother about that, so I won't linger too much on the subject. But I think for the most part, the art is perfectly fine. But there are a few panels that really did stand out to me. The most notable one is this one of Shrewd's first meeting with Fitz, when he first makes a pact between them. You can see Shrewd here kneeling, offering his hand out, but more importantly, you can see the fool mirroring the king. You can already see the fool reaching out for Fitz, kneeling before his catalyst. Meanwhile, Rigo is looking down at them with distaste. I also really admire the depiction of the fool on the page. He visually contrasts with everyone around him. From his skin tone to his hair to his clothing, it feels disjointed in a really great way. And there are other panels as well that do a great job of showing the dynamics between the characters. And the artists genuinely do a great job of using the medium to depict character relationships. The story of the theft of King Shrewd's knife was especially well translated into this visual medium. In my opinion, that's where we should have been left off as readers, as it marks a really important change and growth for Fitz. And it leaves the readers with a bit of a bang. Instead, we go a bit further and we see Molly and the blossoming romance. I think that would have been better saved for the next package of books. After all, At the end of book 5, we pretty much covered all of Fitz's childhood, and book 6 marks the beginning of his adolescence. But I digress, it's not really that important, because in a few weeks actually, we're going to be getting a new batch of issues. And I don't really want to give it a rating until I've read the entire adaptation, but if from what I've said so far, this does interest you, I strongly recommend giving it a try. They're pretty cheap and accessible, and I think it's a great way to dip your toes into the series, especially if you prefer something that's a bit more fast-paced. Anyways, stay tuned and I will keep you updated on my thoughts on Volume 2. And I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Thanks for coming by. See ya. Thanks.